Hello, my name is Frode Bjerke, and I'm the CTO here at Unicast.
And I'm Linn Jordet, and my role is VP of Data Science. Welcome very much to our very first webinar. Let's take a look at the agenda for today. So first, Frode will introduce our company and what we do. Next up, he'll explain what is really the real-world graph and what are the key components it consists of. Finally, then I will dive into some high-level findings about the 2019 holiday season so far, before we round it all up with some Q&A.
Got a little bit ahead of myself there. So before we start, there are a few administrative items to mention. This webinar will be recorded, and we will email you when a replay is available to watch. We will answer a couple of questions at the end of the webinar, but if we don't get to your question, we will contact you through email. And without further ado, let's dive in. So who is Unicast? Here at Unicast, we focus on enabling companies to improve their decision-making. We want companies to access the real world for their decisions. And we do this through describing the flow of people in our surroundings and in our cities. The core asset that we use to describe the real world, we call the real world graph. And it's basically a database or a set of data sets describing the mobility of populations. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the different components or the different data sets that we do have in the real world graph. So first of all, we have traffic trends, which really describes what happened. On the graph here, you'll actually see the traffic trends to 3 different neighborhoods in Miami through the first quarter of the year. And this really gives insight into what happened at the specific time and how many people were in a given area or at the given venue. Then secondly, we do have traffic patterns. This describes what typically happens in an area or at a venue. So what's the typical amount of visits per day? How long are people typically staying in this area or at this venue? And what is the peak hour in a day or in a week? And what's the downtime through the week as well? And then we have catchment areas, which describes the origin of visitors. So people going to a neighborhood or a venue, what the areas they live in or work in, such that you can understand where this area or venue actually attracts people from. And lastly, we have the cross visitation, which applies to our venue data. And this describes where visitors frequent. So people going to a venue, what other venues or brands do they typically frequent to? If someone visited, so visitors of a Nordstrom, do they also go to Macy's as one of their top also frequent venues? And all of these data sets can be accessed through Unicast, either directly as data sets through APIs and file integrations. You can also access them through visualizations and simple reports that you can download. And lastly, and most importantly, we also have the strategic recommendations, which is run by our insights and analytics team. And this team really crunches the number and works with tailoring with the individual client to their needs for bringing this data from a data set to a decision wherever they might be needed. And with that, I'm going to give it over to Linn, which will jump in a little bit what we've been using the real world graph for lately.
Thank you, Frode. So I think now with less than 1 week left to Christmas Eve, everybody's getting their final gift secured. That's top of our list. And this year, Thanksgiving comes quite close to Christmas, more a week closer than normal. And how did this affect the foot traffic in stores? So I'd like to look into the real world graph for some insights. And in this case, we're looking at specific dates. So we want to use the traffic trend component that Frode talked about earlier. In this graph, you see the extrapolated visit counts across all retail categories. Extrapolated, that means that we have applied a scaling factor to make our sample represent the entire population. The orange graph is this year, and the green one is 2018. So the patterns are, as expected, very similar to last year, with Thanksgiving being very quiet and Black Friday remains to be the biggest shopping day of the season. So for easier comparison, let's look across the specific weekdays around Thanksgiving on the next slide. You can see that there has been an increase on all the different dates around Black Friday, but specifically Cyber Monday sees a large increase. This could indicate that people have bought items online and picked them up in a store. And this is a trend that retailers who are not yet offering it could be looking into. Finally, we had a hypothesis that the blizzard conditions in the northern plains could make this area have a different pattern than the national totals. The snow started in the morning on the Saturday the 30th. So to find the answer, we compared this year's Saturday after Thanksgiving to the corresponding Saturday last year. That was the 24th of November. And you can see that especially in North Dakota, we see almost half the amount of people leaving their homes to go shopping on the Saturday after Thanksgiving compared to last year. So the snow definitely had a cooling effect there. This concludes the finding that we will present today. When the last shopping sprint is over and all the data is ready, we plan to publish a more detailed study that will give you insights about the entire holiday season. So that's something to look forward to when we're all back in the office in January. Right, Frode?
Indeed. And before we close out, we'd like to answer some questions from the audience. So first of all, Linn, how much history do we have and what type of venues can you find in our data set?
We first had data on our platform more than 3 years ago, but with the current amount of supply and methodology, we date back to 2018, so 2 years now. When it comes to the venues, our real-world graph has the top 4,500 brands in the US. And additionally, we make in-house derived or hand-drawn polygons for bigger things like airports, parks, and malls.
Great. And we have 2 more questions here. What are we doing on privacy?
Privacy, I think that's interesting because our engineering team are based in Norway. And we, I think, have been for a long time seeing privacy as an important and hot topic. So it's sort of in our blood. And so early on, we had established clear guidelines how to ensure the ethical use of our data. And today, if an incoming request is not answered by the guidelines, we also have an ethics committee that will deal with these type of requests. So we really think that taking a strong stance in the privacy field might lose us some attractive deals in the short run, but it will develop both us and the industry in the right direction in the long run. So people ask all the time about GDPR and now CCPA. Of course, we are GDPR compliant in the EU and also have all the plans ready for CCPA when it comes into effect.
Thank you. And I guess we jumped over a little bit in terms of we didn't describe where we get our data from. So you might want to explain that as well, Linn.
Of course. So there are different types of location data. We base our products on GPS data collected through our partners or through SDK that's installed in apps. It's all vetted and filtered with different criteria, especially for the product Real World Graph. We have quite strict criteria on horizontal accuracy and unnatural travel patterns, and just to make sure that our sample is stable and reliable.
Awesome. And with that, we'd like to round off and thank you all for attending this webinar. A reminder that a recording of this presentation will be made available to all attendees in the next few days. And to learn more about us and the Real World Graph, please visit unicast.com. My name is Frode.
And I'm Linn, and we want to wish you a really happy holiday season. Thank you for listening.